So it was about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, that Russian troops moved into eastern Ukraine. And throughout the West, Western media reported this as a totally unprovoked act of aggression. Who could have seen it coming? But there was, if you paid very close attention, one political group in the United States that had a different explanation for it. And it was a group a lot of people would dismiss as fringe, a group called the African People's Socialist Party. And to be honest, we'd never heard of them. But around this time, they started releasing videos with a different view. Those videos were critical of the United States and NATO. And they pointed out that there was, in fact, a history here, and that NATO had been expanding eastward for quite some time and putting a lot of pressure on Russia. Now, you may agree or disagree with that, but they had a coherent view of it. And to give you an example of what that view was, here's video from the group's chairman, a man called Omali Yeshitela. Watch.
There's a discussion about Russian military border buildup on its border with Ukraine, and how this represents a terrible threat to Ukraine by Russians. But there is no acknowledgement of the history that took us to this place, how the U.S. overthrew, participated in facilitating the overthrow of a government in Ukraine that was friendly to the Soviet Union. Nor does it talk about the history of this relationship between Ukraine and Russia. And you have to remember that they're using NATO here too. And NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was something that came into existence to deal with the Soviet Union, or Soviet Russia as it used to be called. And so this is an ongoing aggression. It did not just start. It's been going on for a while, but the U.S. government relies on the ignorance of the people in this country and much of the world that's facilitated by people like Zuckerberg.
So you can agree or disagree with that analysis. A couple parts of it are indisputably true. One, the U.S. government does rely on the ignorance of its population to do things in that population's name that the population doesn't want. Start all kinds of pointless wars, for example, get people killed, bankrupt the government. That's all real. It's also true that there is a history in Ukraine, and you may or may not think it justifies Russian aggression, but there's no question that NATO has been moving eastward, and it's hard to see why, what benefit there is to the NATO member states. In any case, that's a point of view, agree with it or not. But for some reason, the FBI was watching. They were watching, and they considered sentiments like that not just wrong or offensive, but a crime. And so 3 months later, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, our federal law enforcement tasked with keeping us safe, spent its time, and a lot of agents, it looked to be dozens of agents, raiding the home and the office of the man you just saw speaking, as well as the homes of 6 other members of his organization. Dozens of heavily armed agents descended with automatic weapons. They used flashbang grenades and drones. The first thing they did when they broke in, when they smashed the door, was to tape over the internal security cameras so there would be no record of what they were doing. And then they walked off with a huge amount of material. They stole things from Yeshitela and his wife and a bunch of other people who work for this organization. Then they handcuffed them and led them away. This is how they described the experience at the time.
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is the one that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
So if you're watching this video right now, the chances are that you're probably not a revolutionary black nationalist. We're not, obviously. But you may be an American, and if you are an American, or if you believe in the idea of America, you should care about this case. Why? Because of the charges. Now, typically in situations like this, when the city of Philadelphia, for example, incinerated the entire MOVE community back in the 80s, when the U.S. government under Bill Clinton killed all the Branch Davidians and their children at Waco, when federal agents murdered Randy Weaver's wife and child and shot his dog, there's some pretext for doing it. There's a gun charge. They were caught with bomb-making materials. There's some weird sex stuff going on. They're child pornographers. It's human trafficking. They at least bother to tell you a story that makes you stop asking more questions because you think to yourself, well, these people were obviously very bad. They did something that was a legit felony, and they probably got what was coming to them. What's so interesting about this case is that the government under Joe Biden is not even pretending that they did anything illegal. There's no actual crime here. No one has been charged with bomb making or hurting anyone or any act of violence, no act of embezzlement or theft. What they're charged with is liking Russia, is having opinions that the Biden administration doesn't want them to have, saying things that they're not supposed to say in public. So even if you're not a revolutionary black nationalist, you should care deeply about this case because first they come for people like this, people on the fringe, and then they come for you. The details of the story are even more shocking than we're describing, and we're going to get them from the man at the very center of it, Omali Yeshitela, the chairman of this group, the man now accused of being a Russian agent and about to go on trial. We're honored to have him join us now. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. This is an important interview for us. It helps us to break out of this encirclement, information encirclement that has been imposed on us by the U.S. government. And when we talk about the ignorance of the people being a factor here, part of the way to keep the people ignorant is to keep them from participating in discussion.
Yes.
Because the attack on my right to speak is also an attack on the right of the people to hear. So I have something to say. People may, as you said, agree or not agree with it, but at least they can have opinions that are informed opinions about agreeing or not agreeing with me. But when they use grenades and battering rams and armored vehicles and assault weapons and things like that to keep me from talking, and when they talk about putting me in prison for 15 years, which is the equivalent of a life sentence for me, this is designed to keep the people from hearing what I have to say. And it's a real testimony, in my opinion, of the fragility of a social system that cannot tolerate a discussion coming from somebody from one of the most economically depressed sector of the city of St. Louis. So it's all a falsification. I wanted to say, first of all, that our lawyers, for the purpose of making this defense, had to move forward and say that even if we did what they said we did, that the First Amendment protects us. But I want to say beyond that, that they fabricated most of what they say, that they're lying. It's mostly a fabrication, and that they are politically motivated in doing what they have done because of internal crisis and crisis in the existing global system that sees forces like China and Russia, and increasingly even countries like Iran, countries like Venezuela are challenging the hegemony of a country that has held that for the longest period of time, has been the big hegemon. And so I think this is a domestic crisis that's represented by what we see happening inside this country right now. And what we see being partially responsible for it by forces around the world who are challenging the ability of the United States to continue to be the big dog here. I think that's what we're looking at. And then, of course, there's the immediate personal interests of a guy who's running for president, re-election, and who is also attempting to escape the moniker of being sleepy. So, I mean, I think these are some of the factors that informs much of what's happening right now.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. The internet is crowded with interesting things that don't really matter. On TCN, we attempt to bring you interesting things that actually do matter, and a lot of them. interviews, long form and short, videos, documentaries. You can find all of it on tuckercarlson.com, and we hope you will.